Welcome everyone back to the Jimmy Duster Music Channel, and going to talk about a seminal year in music. As I was going back through, we're talking about albums that turned 50 years old this year, so albums that were released in 1973. And I don't know about you, but going back through 1973, I'm like, if this isn't the best year in music, I don't know what is.
In my humble opinion, and I think I told you this a long time ago, it's my favorite year of the 70s.
Yeah, easily for me, I think.
It's not even close. We did a 72 earlier, and that's a very strong year. But I just, there's a lot of records in 73 that are, there's just a couple seminal records that are my favorite artists that I think that are the best particular records by some of my favorite artists. So it's just a really strong year. The only years that I prefer to 73 in history are probably 1982, which we did, and in 1967 would be the only two. But 73 is the cream of the crop of the 70s.
Yeah. See, this even stood out to me above 82, which was a great year, and 72 that we talked about. You know, both those we talked about last year were great years. So excited to hear this. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, folks. Leave comments for us. We'd love to hear what you think about what we're doing. We like to hear nice things said and make it know that it's all worthwhile and that people are actually out there listening. So thank you for those that have been watching the channel. Don't know our topic coming up 2 weeks from tonight, but we'll figure that out. And we'll have some posts about it and stuff so you can see. But let's dig into 1973. You ready?
Let's do it.
I'm ready. I'll start tonight. How's that?
Yeah, please do.
I'll start and then you can go. So we were talking a little bit before we went on the air, and I said I could easily make my top 5 be all funk records from this year, or all fusion records, all prog records. I could easily make a category, a top 5, and be completely satisfied with it. So this was a tough one for me. I do have a pretty good representation of several different genres in here, and I'm going to start out in the funk genre. And I mean, there were some great funk albums that year: Fresh by Sly and the Family Stone, Head to the Sky, Earth, Wind and Fire, Blackbird, a great album, Inner Visions, Stevie Wonder, maybe his seminal album of that year, 3+3 by the Isley Brothers. So just a great record. But for me, my number 5 is a debut album from a West Coast-based funk band, Tower of Power. And to me, this is just, I never listened to Tower of Power until probably like early 2000s, and I started listening to them and fell in love with them immediately. You know, if you like horns, you like guitar, you like greasy funk bass, it's all on here for you. You know, this is a terrific album. What is Hip? Clever Girl, This Time It's Real, Will I Ever Find a Love, Get Your Feet Back on the Ground. It's a very hard to go, maybe one of my 5 favorite ballads of all time. Soul Vaccination, Both Sorry Over Nothing, Clean Slate, Just Another Day. Easily a 10 out of 10 album for me. Tower of Power's debut from 1973, if you can see the full picture here.
Yeah, fantastic pick. I actually did not listen to that one, but I definitely trust your judgment. My number 5 is a repeat performer from 1972. And this is, I guess, my hard rock / glam pick. It's going to be David Bowie, Aladdin Sane. This is one of, I would say, this is one of his, I give this guy 7 masterpieces, okay? And I'm a big fan of his work, and I always have been. This is an interesting record. It's probably his second hardest rocking record in his catalog, next to The Man Who Sold the World. But there's just great songs all over this. There really aren't any misses. It's not as memorable as Ziggy Stardust, because Ziggy Stardust is Ziggy Stardust. And this is probably in his catalog the record that is closest to the one that it has succeeded. In other words, this record has a lot of similarities with Ziggy, but you can tell he's going in a more theatrical direction on this one. At the same time, lot of hard rock elements, great songs all over the record. Really, three essential songs are Panic in Detroit, inspired by his friend Iggy Pop. That's just got a great outro by Mick Ronson. It's basically that's a hard rock song, a fantastic one. I also love the title track, Aladdin Sane, which is him really going in a theatrical direction, really incorporating some elements of free jazz into his music. And I love his vocals on Aladdin Sane. It's just a smooth song with some free jazz with a free jazz kind of a feel to it. And also Cracked Actor, which is basically a very heavy blues song. It's kind of like the Rolling Stones on steroids as far as the instrumentation goes. But those are the three essential tracks from the record. Other great stuff on here. Obviously, the Gene Genie is a fantastic single, again, inspired by Iggy Pop. So fantastic record, one of his 7 masterpieces. My hard rock glam pick, David Bowie, Aladdin Sane, 10 out of 10.
I did hear a great version of Gene Genie over the past couple of weeks here. David Bowie, of course, singing, but Jeff Beck on guitar. It was from maybe 2010, 2011, a version that they did. It was good. So
rest in peace, Jeff Beck.
Rest in peace, Jeff Beck. I know he was a hero to both of us. So.
Oh yeah, I've always we're not to digress too much, but I always love that short, sweet solo on Evil Hearted You on the Yardbirds. It's my favorite Yardbirds song ever. I think the Yardbirds' best work was with Beck, not with Clapton or Page, in my humble opinion.
And he was the one that actually drew me to play guitar, was Jeff Beck. I just remember hearing his solo. I mean, I always knew who Jeff Beck was, but never listened to much, and heard his solo that he did with Rod Stewart on People Get Ready. And just, I was like, what is this sound he is making with the guitar? And, you know, just the tones that he got, he was a magician. So yes, rest.
One of the greatest ever, no doubt about it.
And David Crosby, you know, lost.
Yeah, rest in peace, David Crosby.
Here the last couple of weeks. So certainly. Okay, so back to me for my number 4. Sorry to bring it down a little bit there, but number 4, I'm going to move into the fusion category. And again, you know, Birds of a Fire, Mahavishnu Orchestra could have been in here just as easily in the top 5. Light as a Feather or Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy, either one of Return to Forever. Herbie Hancock's Headhunters, you know, one of the greats from his collection.
Absolutely.
Love, Devotion, and Surrender by Carlos Santana and John McLaughlin. Easily could have been in here. I could have made a top 5 just from fusion, but I had to go at number 4 with Spectrum by Billy Cobham. Just an incredible piece of fusion. Quadrant 4, Searching for the Right Door. The title track, Spectrum, is a must. Anxiety, Tori and Matador, Stratus. The guitar playing by, his name's escaping me right, Tommy Bolin. Tommy Bolin on guitar on Stratus is just incredible. You know, finishes up with To the Women in My Life, Laylee, Snoopy's Search, Red Baron. This was a copy I bought here recently, 40th anniversary or 50th anniversary repressing. I guess this would have been from the 40th anniversary, since this year would be the 50th. But the lineup of players on here, I already talked about Tommy Bolin on guitar, Billy Cobham on drums, of course, Jan Hammer, electric piano, acoustic piano, and Moog synthesizer, Lee Sklar on bass, a guy who's played on probably more records than anybody in history, you know, on bass on that. Just a fantastic lineup to the band, and that's my number 4, Billy Cobham, Spectrum.
Great pick. My number 4, I don't have on any physical format. Okay, I'm going to show you the CD that precedes the pick for this year because I don't have it on CD or vinyl. And I want to mention there's a couple mixes of it, so it's kind of a complicated situation. But my number 4 is Raw Power by Iggy and the Stooges, and this is my hard rock pick. Okay. You can call this, we can debate genres all day. Like, what is this record? Is it hard rock? Is it punk rock? Is it proto-punk? Is it proto-thrash? I mean, is it heavy garage? is all these different ways you can look at this record. I don't have it. This is Funhouse, which is my favorite Stooges record from 1970, and this is actually my favorite hard rock record of all time, Funhouse. But we are talking about 1973 and Raw Power. You can visualize the cover for this. It's quite an iconic cover. He is behind the mic. His hands are cupped over the mic. He's looking out the void of the show. He's got his eyeliner on. He's probably looking for the right spot to throw some peanut butter, maybe, or to go out into the crowd, because he did do stuff like that. This is a very physical performer. And I think I'm quoting Danny Sugarman, who wrote "No One Gets Out Here Alive" about the Doors and Jim Morrison. Iggy Pop was his favorite frontman post Jim Morrison. Also my favorite frontman post Jim Morrison. According to Sugarman, the late Danny Sugarman, rest in peace, Danny Sugarman, Iggy Pop was insanity meets genius. He's not the only one who thought Iggy was a genius, just a very physical performer. But Raw Power, such an influential record. There would be no Sex Pistols. There would be no Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. There would be no Nirvana Nevermind. Countless other acts have borrowed from this record. But it's just a great hard rock record. It is in your face. It is visceral. It is raw. It is primal. It has swag. 3 essential tracks, Search and Destroy, which is just an incredibly intense track, and some great guitar work by James Williamson on that. Also, Shake Appeal, which has got almost like a James Brown, Little Richard kind of a swag to it. And lastly, the title track, Raw Power. These are heavy tracks. Call it proto-punk, hard rock, whatever you want. This record just has a very intense feel to it that none of the bands that followed the Stooges, be it GNR, Appetite, the Pistols, Nirvana, none of them ever quite captured the power of the Stooges, in my opinion. And my number 4 is Iggy and the Stooges' Raw Power from 1973.
Great choice. Yeah, Iggy is definitely one of the most underrated frontmen of all time.
Go ahead. Well, he's still out there. You know, he's still
still
around on stage. I saw a clip of him in Munich, Germany. People are going crazy to No Fun off the first Stooges record. And Funhouse and Raw Power back to back. That's hard to beat in the hard rock pantheon for me. Funhouse is my favorite, but Raw Power is my favorite of 1973. And the fact that he's still alive is a testimony to his willpower. He's more or less the Keith Richards of frontmen. I have no idea how this guy has done what he's done to himself, survived, and thrives. And now he's bigger than he ever was.
Yep.
He's got really good genes.
Yep.
I don't know what else to say.
I completely forgot about that album. Great choice. Number 3, I've talked about this. Moving into the prog category here. And prog, we talked about this a little before. My top 5 easily could have been Selling England by the Pound, Brain Salad Surgery, and A Glass House, A Passion Play, Dark Side of the Moon, which I have a copy of back here, Dark Side of the Moon. But just a seminal year for, like we've talked about, funk, fusion, and prog rock. Talked about this album before on the channel. One of my favorite albums of all time. One song, that's Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield. Mike Oldfield was 19 when he did this. He did all the instruments himself, just, tied a couple 16 or 24 track recorders together and went to work and created a masterpiece. You can just put it on and zone out for 40 minutes or 45 minutes, however long it is, and just enjoy life and enjoy the music. It's just one of those pieces you put on, take out the fact that it was in The Exorcist, which is one of the scariest movies of all time. But I just can't get over enough how great that album is. And for it to, fall ahead of Dark Side of the Moon, which, Pink Floyd's one of my all-time favorite bands, was a tough decision to make, but I had to mention Mike Oldfield and Tubular Bells again on here. So
I need to listen to that record.
Yeah, you do.
I really do. And I listened to about 25 records, and that was not one that I mean, I listened to a lot of stuff, but I couldn't fit everything in. But I need to
Yeah.
listen to that record. You are correct. My number three, this is really a hybrid record. It, boy, I have heard a lot of songs on this record. Love them all. Listen to the whole record, and I realized it's just packed with hits and songs that I've heard. The songs that I haven't heard are tremendous. Stevie Wonder, Intervisions. This pretty much blew me away when I first heard it about 2 months ago. I love this record. It has a very strong emotional vibe to it. It's a very spiritual record. The vocals are astoundingly good. Stevie's playing all these different instruments. It's almost like Proto-Prince in some ways, in terms of his instrumentation and the ability of things, the amount of things the guy can do. He's not only excelling on the electric piano, he's playing a lot of bass on this record. He's doing hand claps. His voice is incredible. But really, it's about, with the profundity and the spirituality on this record, it's really, which, again, it's a very deep record. If you listen to it, it's really about just great songs. Too High is a great song. It's quite deep. Don't You Worry About a Thing, great song. Obviously Higher Ground, which I first heard by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but their version pales in comparison to this original. Trust me on that. And probably one of my songs of the year, and I had not heard this song before I first heard this record a couple months ago, is Visions. It's my favorite song on the record. And it's kind of entering into rock territory as well, a little bit. This record really is a hybrid. It's got soul elements, it's got funk elements, it's got jazz elements, it's got some rock elements, and it's got pop elements. I mean, it really mixes everything up really well, and the vocals are great. Visions is such a deep song and such a great vocal performance from Stevie. And whoever is playing guitar on that track for him really, really nails the guitar bits. Very melodic and beautiful. Yeah, Visions is one of my 3 favorite songs of the year. I'll get to that at the end. But my overall number 3 is, it's going to be Stevie Wonder, Intervisions. Absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, I definitely can't fault that one. It was literally, when I said it came down to 3 minutes prior to coming on here, it was between that and Tower of Power for my funk album of the year. I was just trying to see who was on that.
The players are great, but Stevie's playing so much himself. He's playing bass,
drums, harmonica. Dean Parks plays acoustic guitar on it, and David T. Walker plays electric guitar.
Oh yeah, his guitar players are just sensational. That record blew me away.
Well, that's different on different songs. Yeah, Visions was Dean Parks on acoustic and David T. Walker on electric.
That is such a beautiful song. Like I said, it's going to be one of my 3 songs of the year, which I'll get to at the very end.
Yeah. All right, number 2. Number 2 for me, it was down to more in the straight ahead rock category. Call this band what you will, whether you call them Southern rock, blues rock, country rock. It's just good rock and roll, no matter how you slice it. And this band lost their founding member and guitar player a year prior. Different band came out with the Allman Brothers Band and Brothers and Sisters. I love this album. When I first started playing guitar, this was one of the first albums I listened to by the Allman Brothers, and immediately fell in love. Now, obviously, Duane Allman was an incredible player and will never be forgotten with the stuff he did. I've talked about it on the show before, the Hey Jude with Wilson Pickett and some of the stuff that he did. It was an incredible guitar player, but this became more the Dickie Betts Show, who I think was kind of overshadowed by Duane a little bit. And Dickie is a tremendous guitar player in his own right. You've got Wasted Words, Ramblin' Man, which was a song that Dickie sang and penned, Come and Go Blues, more straight ahead blues, Jelly Jelly, remake of an old blues song, Southbound, Jessica, their instrumental classic. It ends up with Pony Boy, a little acoustic, sort of a a lot of slide on it from Dickie, and just an incredible album from maybe my all-time favorite band, one of definitely in my top 5.
I really recognize their talent. They're one of those bands that they're definitely not in my wheelhouse, but I like listening to their music when it's around me, because I certainly recognize their talent. Fillmore East has always been my favorite, just because it just kind of goes off into these almost spacey jams. And a lot of free jazz kind of improv on Fillmore East. And I love, it's almost like listening to Coltrane and, I don't know, Sun Ra doing something together, listening to Dickie Betts and Dwayne on Fillmore East. But I definitely respect them a lot. I did listen to that record, by the way, and I like it, but it didn't make an honorable. I didn't think it would make an honorable mention for me, but I know you're a big fan, so I listened to it, and I did like it.
Great.
My number 2, I hate to be predictable, but I'm going to be predictable. Just because of the emotional magnitude of it, it is going to be Dark Side of the Moon. Number 2, most people, this is the consensus number 1 record for the year. Okay. It's probably the consensus number 1 record of all time. If you look at most lists of what's the greatest record of 1973, Dark Side is number 1 on 49 out of 50 lists. And I hate to be, I didn't put it number 1 though, so give me credit for that. But my top 2, this and my number 1, are really cinematic experiences, and that's why this is my number 2. Now, this is widescreen 3D cinema where you're not inside the music, you're outside looking into the music on the screen in the 3-dimensional colors. It's quite vivid. My only problem with this record, even though it's number 2, I've said this a million times. This record's been dissected so many times, there's no reason to overanalyze it, but I think Money should have been on Wish You Were Here. I don't think Money, I like Money a lot as a standalone rock song, but it doesn't fit the flow of this particular record. I've said it before. Great song, but it belongs on Wish You Were Here. The rest of this record, Money's more of a rock song. The rest of the record is this ethereal flow into the atmosphere, and so many beautiful emotional moments like Great Gig in the Sky, Time, Breathe, Any Color You Like. I can go on and on and on. It's a very emotional listen, and I love it. Its accolades are well deserved, and it is my number 2, Dark Side of the Moon, a very deep record.
And a bonus, you can sync it up with Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Allegedly. I'd never done that. And last night I saw it came up on my YouTube as something I might enjoy. So I watched a little bit of it.
Did it work? Did it work?
I don't know. I mean, couldn't really see anything that made it seem like it wasn't working, but nothing really that made it seem like it was working.
Someone really needs to really do that. I've mentioned that before, like really. But
you can watch it on YouTube. I only watched like maybe 3-4 minutes of it. So
the mystique certainly is riveting. The fact that there's a it's a fabled legend. There's a lot of mystique to that legend. Yes.
All right, number 1. Another album I've talked about on the show before, the debut album from this band in 1973. There was a lot of great debuts, including Countdown to Ecstasy, one by Steely Dan, another one of my favorite bands of all time. It's not my number 1. My number 1 is from a short-lived band called Montrose. This is 10 out of 10, 12 out of 10, whatever you want to rate it. Every song, beginning to end, is fantastic. There was never anything quite like this beforehand, and Montrose never really did anything like this after. They kind of went in a different direction with their next couple of albums. The singing debut of one Mr. Samuel Hagar, obviously later went on to become the Red Rocker, did a lot of solo stuff, joined Van Halen. And Eddie Van Halen often cited this album as the album that made him what he was. Seminal influence by this album on bands that came after. There would be no Van Halen if there wasn't Montrose. I'll even go out on a limb and say that every song on here is just incredible. One of the greatest hard rock albums of all time. Probably, I would put this number 2 on my favorite debuts of all time.
That's really high. Ooh.
But they really didn't do anything much after this. So it was kind of a short-lived incredibleness. Although Ronnie Montrose went on to, do stuff with Gamma and a lot more fusion-oriented stuff. And
Gamma, like the turtle in Godzilla that flew in the outer space. You say
like
Gamma?
The Greek letter Gamma.
Oh, Gamma. I thought you said Gamma.
Oh.
I was thinking of the turtle with supersonic powers that went through space.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry, I misheard. I'm not familiar with Gamma.
I don't remember Gamma.
Is Bad Motor Scooter on that one?
Yes.
Okay, I know that song. That's a fun song.
Yeah, Bad Motor Scooter.
Rock Candy, is that on there?
Rock Candy.
Okay, I know those two.
Rock the Nation. Space Station number 5. Every song on here is great. Yeah, the two that you would know would be on there, Rock Candy and
good hard rock songs.
Yeah.
All right, my number 1, it wasn't really close. Every album that I mentioned is a definite masterpiece. However, artistically, I just think this record it can't be beaten. As a matter of fact, every single time I listen to this record, and I listen to it yet again, I always discover some new nuance, some new texture. There's always something different that I hear that I never heard the first time, okay? And it's hard to classify this record. Some people do consider it a progressive rock record. I don't. Some people, call it a glam record. I don't. It really kind of transcends a genre, and it might be the first true art rock record ever recorded, and that is 1973's For Your Pleasure by Roxy Music. And to get a good look at the cover there, that is Amanda Lear, who was Salvador Dali's muse, on the cover, and she was also Brian Ferry's girlfriend. He dated a lot of these cover models. They're obviously very famous for their covers, but they are a great band, and they were absolutely ahead of their time on this. Now, this record really takes a bit of inspiration from David Bowie, okay, but it goes way beyond what Bowie was doing at this time. They're probably the first rock band to ever take, that I'm aware of, to take krautrock, okay, acts like Can. And Can was doing very experimental things in the late 60s, early 70s before this was recorded, and taking that and incorporating that into a rock band kind of a setting. There's also some free jazz influences on this record. Brian Ferry's vocal style is very unique. This quick trigger vibrato, he would develop into more of a crooner later as we get to Avalon and the early 80s stuff. But looking at this record, it starts off with Do the Strand, kicks off with an absolute bang, straightforward rocker, up-tempo song, kind of like Suffragette City by Bowie, but with great sax and piano work by Ferry. We move right into Beauty Queen. And if you think you're going to get all up-tempo stuff on this, think again. The mood is really turned down. We now have a Wistful Longing song written by Brian Ferry. Beautiful vocals, some great peeling guitar work by Phil Manzanera at the very end of the track. It sounds like it might be playing a slide on that. That's a brilliant track. Strictly Confidential, one of the most maudlin tracks I've ever heard. So sentimental. You feel that Ferry's protagonist has just accepted the fate that he's been handed. And again, it's one of these typical Roxy Music tracks where the protagonist is forlorn and love lost and love struck and love sick. Great musicianship on the track. Additions of You, the 4th track, we go into an up-tempo rocker here. This is the hard rock song on the record, okay? Really a proto-punk song, but what's really ingenious about Additions of You, in 4 minutes, it packs in 3 different solos by 3 different musicians. And they're all short and sweet, Nothing overblown, no Yngwie Malmsteen style superfluous guitar work. It's beautiful. You get a quick, short, great sax solo from Andy Mackay. It goes into a brilliant synthesizer solo by Eno, and it ends with a brilliant guitar solo by Phil Manzanera, all perfectly constructed to fit within the framework of a riveting and catchy 4-minute song. Perfect rock song with great instrumentals from the vocalists. We move on to a track that everyone must hear from this record, and that's In Every Dream, Home a Heartache, which is perhaps the most famous track on the record, even though it wasn't a single. Bryan Ferry's Ode to a Blow-Up Doll. One of the weirdest songs ever recorded by a mainstream rock band, and incredibly riveting. It is a look into the suburban nightmare of the early 1970s, whether I don't care if you're in the UK or the US, I think it can apply. Ferry is in more or less a trance when he delivers the vocals for this track. Brian Eno's synths wash in and wash out like they do across the whole record. Brilliant outro by Phil Manzanera on this track, and it fades away, then it comes back in at the very end, creating like an illusion of space and time for the listener. It's quite trippy, actually. Then we move on to maybe the most important track on the record, The Bogus Man, the most avant-garde track on the record. It's Bryan Ferry's ghostly narrative about a stalker, apparently. There are vocals through the first 4 minutes and 15 seconds of the song. Ghostly vocals by Bryan Ferry. Then it leads into almost a free-form, free jazz, krautrock infused psychedelic hybrid for the last 5 minutes of the song, taking you straight to the cosmos. Okay, no lyrics the last 5 minutes of the song, no vocals. Brian Eno's wash of soundscapes just sweeps you away into the cosmos on this song. Meanwhile, Andy Mackay, the saxophonist, is playing some brilliant, almost free jazz, Sun Ra, late period John Coltrane style sax over this wash of cosmic synthesizer. He's playing free jazz notes over it via the sax. Then Manzanera's textured guitar creeps in, intruding upon the whole scene, and it is absolutely a stunning avant-garde track. Ghostly lyrics by and vocals by Ferry. Musically takes inspiration from early Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett era, also some Sun Ra and John Coltrane, and also German kraut rock band Can. It's a brilliant song. It goes into Gray Lagoons, the 7th song on the record. Just a beautiful song. This song almost feels kind of proto-Rocky Horror Picture Show. I don't know how else to put it if you listen closely to it. A couple of songs in this feel. Do the Strand also has a kind of a Rocky Horror Picture Show proto vibe to it. And it's really worth mentioning. There's beautiful piano all over the record from Bryan Ferry, and just heavy drumming from the drummer, Paul Thompson. Lastly, the last track on the record, it would be fitting to end with a Brian Eno dominated track since it's his last album with the band, and that is the title track For Your Pleasure, which opens up with some tasty guitar, kind of spacey guitar from Phil Manzanera, goes into some interesting vocal passages from Ferry, great vocals, and it just ends with a 1-minute wash of cosmic madness via Bryan Ferry, and that last minute of the song, you can absolutely hear the genesis of Radiohead's Kid A without any question, particularly everything in its right place. This record is a 12 out of 10. Every single time I listen to it, I discover something new. It is the quintessential art rock record. If you were to look in a dictionary and see a picture of what an art rock record looks like, the cover, it would be this. And the whole thing has like very much a film noir kind of a feel to it, almost as if you're caught in the music itself, like you're part of the music, and you're in the picture, like a Scorsese movie in a lot of ways. But it's really cinematic, like Dark Side of the Moon, but done in a different way. Just a brilliant record, a 12 out of 10. My favorite record of 1973, and my favorite record of the 1970s. Roxy Music for your pleasure.
You have to listen to more of their stuff because, I know Manzarek is a genius, and Eno, of course, is
they're all
the
genius.
greatest arranger ever.
Fairy's a genius too. There's a bunch of
I
geniuses.
always think of them as more of an 80s band, but I need to get back and listen to a lot of their 70s stuff.
One more thing about this album cover, and album covers aren't important to me in terms of what comes within they're not as important as what comes within the album, but there's only one other album I've ever heard, where the album cover, I think, really kind of, it really shows you what you're going to get inside.
Yeah.
The only other record I've ever heard that I think you get that feeling by looking at the album cover is Susie and the Banshees Tinderbox. That's it. It's only 2 records I've ever heard where the album cover predicts the material inside the actual record. But yeah, I think it's the greatest art rock record of all time.
That's speaking of records, I think you just set one. We were 35 minutes in before you mentioned Susie and the Banshees.
Oh, well, if you mentioned Roxy Music, it's impossible not to mention Susie and the Banshees. They formed a Roxy Music concert.
Yep.
Nucleus.
You didn't mention my 1973 living room behind me, by the way.
Oh, I didn't even notice it. I was so focused on the
time machine back in my living room, 1973. So, all right, what do you got honorable mention wise?
Real quick here, I'm gonna start with another Roxy Music record, Stranded. They dropped 2 in 73. Stranded is more streamlined. It's not as experimental. It veers more towards straight up hard rock, but it still has experimental elements. 9 out of 10. Amazona, Street Life, and also Mother of Pearl. All terrific songs on Stranded. No Brian Eno on Stranded. Eddie Jobson, who played with some other bands, comes in and takes his place. And it's more streamlined, but still great stuff. 9 out of 10. Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy, gets an honorable mention. It is the best Led Zeppelin album, in my opinion. I cannot stand the reggae thing, whatever that is, Jermaker. But all the other songs on this record are really good, and No Quarter is the best thing they ever recorded. That's also a 9, maybe a 9.5 out of 10 for House of the Holy. Not quite a masterpiece, but their best record. Sly and the Family Stone, fresh. Invigorating listen. Proto-Prince all the way. Boy, you can see how Prince developed his Camille character on Sign of the Times by listening to Sly sing. That incredible vocal performances on the record. It wasn't as diversified as a Stevie Wonder record, though.
Yeah.
But it was still a great listen. A 9.5 out of 10. If you want me to stay, just fantastic. Frisky, another great song on that record. Great funk all over that record. What else? King Crimson, Lark's Tongue, and Aspic. Fantastic. It's very experimental record, the most experimental straight up prog record on the record. Roxy Music's not straight up prog. Listen to the beginning, Lark's Tongue and Aspic, part 1, and the end, Lark's Tongue and Aspic, part 2, the best 2 parts of the record, but it's 9 out of 10. Alice Cooper, $1 Billion Babies. I really enjoyed this record. I'm glad you introduced me to some more Alice Cooper. I've always liked No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's an iconic riff. Like it's almost like Brown Sugar or something. The riff from that. It's totally iconic. I loved a lot of the other songs on the album. It is somewhat theatrical. It's basically a straight up hard rock record. And what's cool about Alice Cooper is he's taken the Detroit sound that the MC5 and the Stooges invented and kind of streamlining it, making it a little less aggressive, a little less punky, making it more straight up hard rock, but keeping that grit that the Stooges and MC5 had and taking it to the masses, adding a little bit of theatricality to it. Quite brilliant. And I also enjoyed, there's quite a bit of a Sgt. Pepper's influence on that record that I appreciated. 9 out of 10, great record. Do I have anything else? Yes, Can, Future Days. Listen to that in its entirety. Fantastic. The very experimental record fuses obviously krautrock, prog, a little bit of funk, and even some world music vibes. Side 2, Bel Air, absolutely brilliant. It's very much their echoes, if you like Pink Floyd. Can, very influential band. They influenced Roxy Music. I mentioned that. Also Radiohead years and years later. And lastly, my number 1 out. Got one more. The Who, Quadrophenia. Almost forgot about that one. That's an honorable mention. Great songs. The Real Me. Obviously, the very powerful and emotional Love Reign Over Me. It's a great song with great piano work that really sets the mood for that song, and kind of a hard rock power ballad done the right way, as far as I'm concerned. Love Rated for Me, and The Real Me, which is an aggressive song, almost proto-punk, hard rock and kind of a song. Love Quadrophenia. 9 out of 10. Not as good as Who's Next. My number one out, though, first one out, Selling Them by the Pound, was the first one out. Could not eclipse Aladdin Sane, but some of Genesis' finest moments are on this. I don't like this one overall as much as Foxtrot or obviously The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, but it's still a great record. The Cinema Show, absolutely brilliant. First to Fifth is Steve Hackett's finest moment ever in Genesis. Just a brilliant guitar piece by Hackett. And I also like Gabriel's somewhat commercial single, I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe, which is a very interesting and quirky song. So 9.5 out of 10 for this one, first one out. That's what I got for my honorable mentions.
Good choices. I had a lot of the same ones. $1 Billion Babies, I had my honorable mentions. Yeah, I mean, Alice Cooper got a lot from the Beatles, as did everybody.
Sure.
And, a lot of people don't notice that as a reference, so as a point of reference.
I picked up on that right away. Listen
Birds of Fire by the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Great piece of fusion. One we hadn't talked about, Still Alive and Well, Johnny Winter. Good straight-ahead blues rock. You talked about Blue Oyster Cult, Tyranny and Mutation. Great from that year. Some other ones that I have on physical media, Houses of the Holy.
Great record.
Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath.
Didn't like that one so much. I listened to it.
And, of course, my first one out, Dark Side of the Moon.
Great picks, man.
Some other ones I wrote down here that I don't have in my collection. Who Do We Think We Are? Deep Purple. Vagabonds of the Western World. Great Thin Lizzy album. Aerosmith's debut. I've got Quadrophenia down here. Sweet Freedom by Uriah Heep. Pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd. Like them or not, they were probably packed more material into a 5-year period than any American band ever. Lark's Tongues and Aspics. Tres Hombres, the album.
Tres Hombres.
Top album, my favorite of their albums. We're an American Band. Grand Funk. Light as a Feather I talked about. Return to Forever. Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy. Headhunters. 3+3, the Isley Brothers. Some great country rock year that year too. Honky Tonk Heroes, Lonesome, Ornery, and Mean, both by Waylon Jennings. Desperado, the Eagles album from that year. Bob Dylan's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid soundtrack. GP by Graham Parsons. Willie Nelson had a good album out that year. I forget what it was called. But he had a great album out that year as well. And, we didn't even talk about, Steely Dan Countdown to Ecstasy. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, probably the best. Right. The Elton John albums, the double album. Band on the Run. Wings. A Wizard, A True Star. Todd Rundgren's solo album debut. It's 1973 for me. It was hard to come up with 5. That's why I had a whole list there that I had to mention.
The thing is, after I just was floored by For Your Pleasure once again. It's like every time I listen to this record, I find something that I missed before.
Yeah,
it's that kind of a record, and whether you want to, some people consider it prog rock. Then some will call it art rock, and some will call it glam rock. It's kind of a hybrid of everything, but to me, it is more progressive than Dark Side of the Moon without any question.
Yep.
But it's not a straight line progressive rock record like you get with Genesis or King Crimson or later Rush records. It's kind of its own thing, but I just find it absolutely brilliant.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us again, folks. We're going to sign off for the night here. Have a great couple of weeks. We'll be back.
Please like and subscribe.
Yes.
We could use your support.
Do you want to do 1983?
That will be in Dr. Kelly's comfort zone. So, 83.
We'll shoot for 1983 in a couple weeks. If there's any changes, we'll certainly let you know. But hope you enjoyed.
Thanks for watching, folks. Have a good night.
Thanks for watching.